Owning a home is now cheaper than renting in 57.7% of U.S. counties. So why are so many new buyers more stressed about money than their renting friends? If you are weighing renting against buying right now, this is not about throwing money away. It is about the costs each side quietly forgets to count. And both sides forget a lot more than you would think. If you are 30 to 45 years old and this decision is sitting in front of you right now, this is not a lifestyle question. It is a math question, and the industry has been handing you an incomplete spreadsheet. Here's the thing. This video is not going to tell you renting wins. It is not going to tell you buying wins either. Because the honest answer is that both sides of this debate are selectively honest. They each show you the math that favors their conclusion and skip the rest. I call everything they skip the skipped costs. And once you see what is in that pile, the entire debate looks different. Let us start with the strongest case for buying, because it is real and it deserves to be heard properly. When you pay rent, the money leaves your account and does not come back. Full stop. When you pay a mortgage, a portion of every payment goes toward principal. You are building an asset. After 30 years, you own something. After 30 years of renting, you own nothing from those payments. That asymmetry is real and it matters. There is also leverage. Buy a $400,000 home with an $80,000 down payment. If that home appreciates 4% in a year, you gain $16,000 on an $80,000 investment. That is a 20% effective return on your actual cash. No index fund gives you 5-to-1 leverage for free. That is the math the renting side almost never includes. And there is the discipline argument. Homeowners tend to accumulate dramatically more wealth than renters over time. The median homeowner net worth sits around $396,000. The median renter net worth sits around $10,400. That is a 38 times gap. Some of that gap is income. Some of it is location. But a meaningful portion is a forced savings mechanism of a mortgage. You cannot decide to skip paying your mortgage the way you can decide to skip funding your brokerage account this month. That is the honest case for buying. It is strong. It is real. Do not dismiss it. Now let us hear the honest case for renting. Because this side also has legitimate math that the homeownership camp skips. When you rent, you carry no maintenance risk. The boiler breaks. That is not your problem. The roof leaks. Call the landlord. When you own, every system in the building is your liability. And those liabilities are larger than most buyers anticipate. Zillow and Thumbtack put the average hidden homeownership cost at just under $16,000 per year. That is maintenance plus insurance plus property taxes alone. That is an additional $1,325 every month on top of your mortgage payment. Most buyers budget for the mortgage. Almost no one budgets for the $1,325 hiding behind it. Then there is mobility. When you rent, if your job changes, if your relationship changes, if the city changes, you can leave in 60 days. When you own, leaving costs you 8 to 10% of the home's value in transaction costs alone. On a $440,000 home, that is $35,000 to $44,000 just to get out. If you need to sell after 3 years of the flat market, you may walk away with less than you put in. The renting side also has the investment argument. Take the down payment you did not put into a house, invest it in a diversified index fund. Take the monthly difference between renting and the true cost of owning. Invest that too. Over long periods, the compounding can be significant. A Florida Atlantic University study found that on average, renting and reinvesting wins in terms of wealth creation because real estate appreciation tracks closely with traditional financial assets anyway. That is the honest case for renting. It is also strong, also real. So why do most videos pick a side? Because nuance does not get clicks. The real estate industry, the mortgage industry, the personal finance content industry all have a structural incentive to simplify. Rent is throwing money away is a slogan, not analysis. Buying is always better is marketing, not math. What they are collectively doing is hiding what I call the skipped costs. Both sides curate the numbers to favor their conclusion. Here is what the skip costs actually look like when you pull them into the same room. On the buying side, most comparisons skip the maintenance escalation, They assume 1% of home value per year flat. The reality is that maintenance costs are lumpy and they grow. An older home can demand 2% or more annually. Insurance premiums have surged 48% in the past 5 years. Property taxes rise 3 to 7% annually in many markets. The bar of ownership costs keeps growing, and most rent versus buy calculators freeze it at the starting number. They also skip the transaction cost on the exit. You do not just pay to get in, you pay to get out. If you sell in year 5, those transaction costs are spread across just 60 months. The math can flip fast. And they skip the tax drag on the renter's investment portfolio. If the renters discipline, their index funds grow, but when they sell, they pay 15 to 20% in long-term capital gains. That gap between the nominal number and the after-tax number is real money that the renting side often forgets to subtract. On the renting side, most comparisons skip the discipline gap. The theoretical renter invests every saved dollar. The actual renter often does not. The $396,000 versus $10,400 net worth gap exists partly because real humans do not have perfect discipline. The forced savings argument for buying is behavioral, not mathematical, and the renting case depends on a version of you that behaves like a spreadsheet. They also skip the leverage multiplier we talked about, and they skip the year 30 picture. After a 30-year mortgage, the buyer's housing cost drops the property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. The renter's housing cost keeps climbing. If rent has grown at 3% annually for 30 years, a $2,200 rent becomes over $5,300 a month. The buyer's effective monthly cost drops. The lines cross. And nobody who advocates for renting wants to show you that chart. Now let us build the second term. The break-even horizon. This is the number of years you need to stay in a home before buying genuinely wins in a full cost comparison. Is the number that answers the question. And the financial industry does not want you to calculate it for yourself because it reveals that the answer is personal, not universal. Imagine 2 lines on a graph. One line represents the cumulative cost of buying starting high because of the down payment, the closing costs, and those early years of heavy interest and hidden costs. The other line represents the cumulative cost of renting starting lower but climbing steadily as rent increases 3% every year. In the early years, the renter's line is lower. Renting is cheaper. Then, somewhere between year 5 and year 12, depending on your market and your assumptions, the lines cross. After that crossover, the buyer's line is lower. The gap widens. By year 30, after the mortgage is paid, the gap is enormous. That crossover point is the break-even horizon. The national average in 2026 sits around 5 years and 8 months. But that is a national average. In high-priced coastal markets with elevated transaction costs and slower appreciation, it stretches to 10 years or longer. In Midwest and South markets with strong appreciation at lower prices, it compresses to 3 or 4 years. Here is the number you actually need. 3 variables drive everything. How long will you stay? What is your local rent growth rate? And what are the true carrying costs of the property, including the skipped costs? If you plan to stay less than 5 years, the math almost always favors renting. The transaction costs alone will eat your appreciation. If you plan to stay more than 10 years, the math almost always favors buying as long as you include the full skipped costs picture and the rent escalation curve. Between 5 and 10 years, the answer is genuinely market dependent. Run your own numbers. Do not borrow someone else's conclusion. There is one objection I want to address directly, the one the renting side uses most often. It goes like this. The disciplined renter who invests the difference outperforms the homeowner over time. The FAU study supports this. And the logic is sound. In a vacuum. But let me stress test it. For this argument to be true, 4 conditions have to hold simultaneously. Rent growth has to stay below the total cost of ownership, including appreciation. The renter has to actually invest the savings every month with consistency. The investment has to survive the sequence of returns with no panic selling during a crash. And the renter has to hold for long enough that the compounding materializes. If any one of those conditions breaks, the math shifts. And the 396,000 versus 10,400 net worth gap suggests that for most real people, at least one of those conditions breaks. I'm not saying the renting and investing strategy is wrong. I'm saying it requires a version of you that is financially disciplined in a way that homeownership automates. Know which version of yourself you are actually dealing with before you make the call. Here is what this means operationally. 3 steps, not theory, executable this week. Step 1 is to state your assumptions out loud before you do any math. How many years do you actually plan to stay? Be honest. Most people overestimate. Write down your honest number. Then write down the rent growth rate in your specific market, not the national average. Your market. Then write down the local property appreciation rate over the last 10 years. These 3 numbers are the only inputs that determine your outcome. If you do not know them, you are guessing, not deciding. Step 2 is to build the skipped costs column. Take the home you are considering. Add 1% of its value per year for maintenance as a floor. Add property taxes at your local rate escalating 3 to 4% annually. Add insurance, which has been climbing fast. Add transaction costs of 8 to 10% spread across your planned hold period. Now look at the renter's side. Add rent growth of 3% per year. Add the tax drag on any invested differential. Add the disciplined risk. What percentage of the savings will you actually invest? That column is the one both sides hide from you. Step 3 is to calculate the break-even horizon for your specific situation. Not a video's generic scenario. Yours. The New York Times RET versus buy calculator is particularly good because it forces you to state every assumption explicitly. Run it at 3 years. Run it at 7. Run it at 12. See where your lines cross. If the crossover happens before you plan to leave, buying looks better. If it happens after renting, looks better. That number is the answer. Here is how I want you to think about this. Buying does not buy you a financial outcome. It buys you optionality of a specific kind. The option to stay put, the option to lock in a housing cost, the option to build equity through forced savings. Renting buys you a different optionality. The option to move. The option to keep capital liquid. The option to avoid maintenance risk. The option to invest your savings wherever returns are highest. Neither optionality is free. Both have skipped costs that the industry does not volunteer. The question is which optionality matches the actual shape of your life. If you are 32 and you genuinely do not know where you will be in 4 years, the mobility optionality of renting is worth real money. Do not let anyone shame you out of valuing it. If you are 38 with kids in school and you know you are staying for 15 years, the equity optionality of buying is worth real money. Do not let anyone scare you out of that either. The financial industry built a story where there is one right answer. There is not. There is your answer based on your timeline, your market, and your discipline. The only thing that fails you is borrowing someone else's math and applying it to your life. Drop a comment with your timeline. How many years are you planning to stay in your next home? That single number probably tells you more about this decision than anything else. And if you are 30 to 45 trying to cut through the noise on decisions like this one, hit subscribe. Dollars into Decades publishes one of these every Tuesday. I'm Malcolm. I will see you in the next one.